Hello, my name is Rowan. Today I'm going to read you Ruby's Diary by Orofiax. This is a horror story about a diary with strange and frightening properties. So, without further ado, let's begin. Life in St. Arcadia's boarding school was dreadfully boring, for nothing out of the ordinary ever happened here. Facing this sea of the mundane, I tried to find my way in the world as a growing teenager. Sadly, neither the thrill of games and sports nor the solace the Bible study group offered fulfilled me in the slightest. Not even the promise of lasting friendships and acceptance gave me purpose, as it had seemed for many of my peers. Even excellence in my studies had become an eventuality and a given, the pursuit of knowledge to derive satisfaction becoming drier with each passing semester. Truthfully, I have always preferred to be alone, a good book being the only company I want for. It has been so for as long as I can remember, and moving away from my hometown and family to study here did little in changing that. Perhaps it was this mentality that led me to Ruby. Well, that wasn't actually her name, but rather one that I coined from her long, flowing hair that always seemed like a wave of scarlet roses. Sporting smooth skin and striking features along with bandages that concealed her eyes, she appeared a blind angel, a sacred tome of purity in hand, much like the delicate goddesses of ancient mythology who watched over the living. I had found her sitting alone at a secluded table in the communal garden during one fateful lunchtime. Far away from the bustle of sports and games and gossip, she appeared to be in a realm of her own, the entirety of her focus upon writing on what seemed to be a diary of hers. A leather-bound tome of sorts, its cover and pages were creased with age, giving off an antique flair, much like a family heirloom. And despite the bandages covering her eyes, she was always busy writing into the book's pages, a pen always in hand like it was an extension of her arm. Curious I was about this spectacle, and thus I had approached her, hoping to peek into the book's contents without her notice. Somehow, though, she sensed my approach, and with a blushed face and a nervous giggle, she shut it away from my prying eyes. Only when I gave up my inquiry did she reopen it, continuing her studious scribbling as though I was never there. Ever since that fateful day, I took to spending most of my free time with her, the both of us silently engaged in literary pursuits of our own. After all, I had long since been disillusioned by the vapidity and shallowness of my peers, who cared only for cute boys and fashionable apparel. Ruby, who possessed neither of these loathsome traits, was to be my new best friend, despite our interactions being limited to simple nods and nervous smiles at the other's presence. Pleasantries aside, however, the whole idea of her writing into that diary of hers boggled my mind. After all, just exactly how could someone deprived of sight read a book, let alone write in one? If anything, it made me constantly wonder, even as I studied and read alongside her, just what exactly she wrote about within that diary of hers. Perhaps it simply held her inner thoughts, an outlet to express her in such a big world. Maybe it was a book of poems dedicated to oblivious sweethearts, who was no doubt a lucky person. Either way, curiosity welled up within me, if only just to know. A simple answer from her lips would have sufficed, even if it was but a lie. But she would never tell, despite my greatest efforts. Frustratingly enough, the only clue of an answer was hidden away by a nervous smile and a reddened face whenever I tried to press my agenda. Facing this, I could not help but feel a tinge of resentment, for it seemed as though Ruby saw me with some measure of disdain, considering me unworthy of her trust. Still, if she ever opposed my presence at her table, her body language nor mannerisms did not in showing so. After all, rarely did she ever regard the presence of me or anyone else with anything but lukewarm indifference. She seemed completely detached from the world, her diary and she seemingly tethered to another realm of existence. Ultimately, it wasn't what she wrote that interested me, but rather the whole secrecy of it intrigued me to no end. You see, I have always prided myself on discovery and inquiry, the pursuit of knowledge itself being its own reward, and to be denied the chance to know was simply maddening. An obsession it was, but it was an obsession I embraced with a passion unlike any other, the spark that gave zest to an otherwise meaningless life. All in all, I just wanted to know what Ruby had within those pages, of what was so valuable that she had to hide from everyone with such secrecy. I just had to know. And one day, as if the heavens above heard my pleas for revelation, I saw Ruby's diary sitting alone on the table, its owner seemingly nowhere around. Knowing this, I felt my hands shaking with sweat, as if sensing my anticipation. Was this my moment of truth? It seemed too good to be true, and yet it seemed to be so. Without a second thought, I picked up the leather-bound tome, fondling its cover in triumph at the coming revelation. However, as I ran my fingers around its leathery surface, I felt my blood freeze up. I did not want to acknowledge the sensation, but it felt as though I was fondling someone's arm. Resisting the revulsion to drop the book, I opened it, goaded on by some morbid curiosity to find the truth like a moth to a poisonous flame. The onus was now upon me to find the truth. Was Ruby some kind of deranged killer under her silent visage? My mind was set awash with delirium, morbid thoughts and even darker theories constantly gnawing at me as I turned the cover over to the first page. Peering through the contents of her diary, I was greeted by increasingly nauseating stench of rotting meat. However, that was the least of my worries, for the pages were home to frantic and incomprehensible scrawling that was anything but English. Said scripture was seemingly a caption for numerous morbid sketches and almost lifelike drawings of alien-like entities, possessing vaguely humanoid gaits with bodies like that of beasts. They appeared like the monsters of ancient legends, ghoulish and evil. Their anatomies seemed too improbable to the point of insanity, much like the deluded ravings of a nihilistic madman, and yet something inscrutable about their poise made them seem frighteningly material, like they could at any time leap out from the fleshy pages and tear me apart with their reeking talons. Perhaps they were the gods worshipped by the men of old. However, these degenerate creatures were drawn to be poised in prayer, engaged in some kind of alien ritual, unbeknownst to anything ever witnessed or read of in all my years of learning. Shivering, I could feel my mind scrambling with inhuman curiosity to make sense of the morbid spectacle unfolding before me. In fact, just the mere sight of this ghastly scene made my eyes twitch uncontrollably. I tried to blink away the discomfort. However, page after page of these maddening sights made the pain more acute, as a seething agony began to take root within my skull. I wanted to look away and throw the book aside, as any perceptive human being would in the face of terror and madness. Alas, I could not, for some compulsion within denied me this rationality. Each page, while maddening in their strange contents, had an enthralling air within that dared me to continue onwards, as though a reward for my perseverance lay ahead. Perhaps it was my thirst for knowledge that drove me onward. The very thing that spurred me to excellence was to be my downfall. But then again, it may very well have been the whispers of unfathomable madness nudging me towards a horrifying revelation. Regardless, as I reached the middle portion of what seemed to be an endless grimoire, I laid eyes on what seemingly was to be the loathsome god of the degenerate men. An unfathomable sight, unlike any other. Nothing in the world, not even the horrifying contents of the pages before, could have prepared me sufficiently. Sporting a faceless visage with what seemed to be an infinite multitude of leering red orbs, its anatomy was demented and ghoulish beyond any form of rational description. After all, how could something have so many eyes, and even more eyes and mores, concealed within those unblinking crimson irises? At this point, I could no longer control my discomfort. Screaming at the top of my lungs, I clutched my eye sockets with both my hands, clawing desperately into them in an attempt to excise what I had seen from my mind. Only after everything had turned from sanguine to pitch black did I stop. My body sprawled over the table from fatigue, my joints and face paralyzed by a sensation pain that was rapidly enveloping me. My surroundings now stung with the scent of copper, and I could feel my uniform become increasingly drenched with a sticky liquid that reeked of fresh blood. Even so, I could not stop screaming, for even in the darkness that was now my sight, they still called out to me, gibbering and howling rapidly, demanding things, damnable things, all in which they chanted in their inhuman tongue. Everything within this horrifying tome seemed so inhumanly unsettling, such that my mind could not ignore the insanity within those accursed pages, despite my utmost efforts to rationalize everything I had seen. As I tried in earnest to rationalize and fathom everything I had seen, I began to feel pangs of envious hatred towards my schoolmates, whose ignorance I had so arrogantly shunned in my self-made illusion of superiority, of whose vapid lives I had dismissed in favor of life dedicated to reckless curiosity. I knew now that blissful ignorance, the greatest gift bestowed upon the human mind by whatever lurking deity fathomed our existence in this dark, uncaring universe, was the only thing protecting us from the horrors that lurked beyond the mind's eye. Sadly, my curiosity had caused it to slip irrevocably from my grasp, a sanctuary lost the moment I laid eyes on Ruby's diary. And now, having beheld these terrible wonders for myself, no longer was it a matter of why, but rather a question of who would be eaten first. Help! Help me! Shh! It was then, as I sat adrift in this seemingly endless void of my own insanity, that I felt Ruby speak to me for the first time. She spoke with a tenderness and passion unlike any other, as though we were lovers for 1,000 lifetimes. Whispering into my ear, I felt her beside me, sheltering me from the tides of mania with her calming words, making the pain I felt no longer exist, nor matter in the slightest. Don't be afraid. Take this and tell it everything you see. You need it more than I do now. As she said this, I felt something being placed into my trembling palms. Leathery yet smooth, it felt like holding someone's hands in mine. This time, however, I held it firmly in my grasp, caressing its fleshy pulp with loving care. With the book in hand, I no longer shivered, Nor did I ever need to feel the urge to scream, for I knew now that my sanctuary lay securely in my hands. Opening the leathery cover with loving care, I flipped onto an empty page, continuing Ruby's work as if the diary had always been mine. I felt my hand pick up a pen from the table with an almost inhuman instinct, as if it was always by my side, waiting for me to take it. Good luck, my friend. And now it was time to write. Such was to be our fate, to record all the terrible wonders that we alone have come to behold, that the world would join us in beholding their wondrous splendor. We upload a new story every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to us, and I look forward to meeting you in the next video. Goodbye.